This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under 18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 539 for November 30th, 2017. Coming up on today's show, Peppermint and his new book. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Minx, and first thing I have to do is apologize for skipping the last 2 weeks of production. It was not intentional, but things got pretty crazy at work. The place that I work has a huge conference. It's actually happening as we speak, and all scheduling, personal time, and self-care went right out the window. So a lot of things, including my own self-care, got put on the back burner. But things are slowing down a little bit now. I'm finally getting back into my old groove. Did a little yoga this morning. I'm back with you. So thank you for your patience. And, as a bit of an apology, I'm going to give you a special super sweet surprise, which is this fantastic interview with Pepper about his new book, Playing Fair, A Guide to Non-Monogamy for Men into Women. So without further ado, here's my chat with Pepper. I am thrilled to welcome back to the studios Peppermint. Welcome back.
Hi, it's good to be back. It's been a while.
It's been a really long time. I'm trying to remember the last time you were on here. I feel like maybe it was 2012 with OpenSF.
Maybe. It's been a couple hundred episodes at least.
Yeah, a couple hundred. Oh, yeah, just a couple hundred.
Just an episode here, an episode there, It adds up.
I am thrilled to have you back. And for those who may not know of your fabulousness, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Pepper. I've been a polyamory organizer and activist for quite some time now. I would say active since 2003. I'm sort of in semi-retirement these days, but being in semi-retirement kind of gave me the space to write a book. I mean, really, it didn't give me the space to write a book, but I wrote the book anyways.
There is never time or space to write a book. You just do it anyway.
There's never space to write a book. You just do it anyways. And that's what I did. Yeah.
Well, fabulous. And I didn't realize that you only got into polyactivism a few years before I did. I started like 2004, 2005, and you were only a little bit before me.
Yeah, I only found polycommunity in 2001, actually.
Oh, yeah. And I found it around 2005, mostly through the BDSM scene. So tell us about this new book that you have written, Playing Fair, A Guide to Non-Monogamy for Men into Women. Why did you decide to write a book, apart from the fact that you had all this spare time sitting around?
Right, and I wanted to make money. And that was the other reason, really.
Because you make so much money from writing books on polyamory.
Right. So, I was definitely having this experience of looking around my polyamorous communities and seeing specifically men having a lot of trouble and in specific ways. And I think there's things about men where the setup of polyamory sometimes doesn't work too well for them. One example is that a lot of men have trouble asking for help, and asking for help in the bigger sense of they won't go to the workshop, or they won't try to take advice for other people. They're just oh, I'm doing non-monogamy. I'm going to do it my way. That should work. Turns out, no, that's probably not going to work unless you happen to be a genius who happened on to good ways to do it straight out of the box, right?
And you never make mistakes, and you understand every single type of human being that could ever exist.
Right, but you actually get some of these attitudes. And so, over the years, I've done some workshops for men, and mostly I've just talked to a lot of non-monogamous men. And I wanted to assemble stuff into a book that hopefully men will read, though again, many of them have trouble asking for help. Or hopefully people in these men's lives will give to them and say, hey, you should read this thing. And sort of collect a lot of these things that were like gender and sexuality specific to men who are into women.
So now I'm curious. So can you give us a little hint of what are some things that you've noticed that men in general have trouble with? Asking for help was one. So what are some other of the sort of key tenets that you thought men need to understand?
We see so much around like flirting and social dynamics and how people act in community, which is not, and it's not to say women don't have trouble with this too, or people of other genders don't have trouble with this. But I see men in particular not going and finding community, or finding a community and just treating it as a pickup zone, or being too direct when flirting, or not being direct at all when flirting, or falling into cultural traps around like who they think should be attractive and who they shouldn't be attracted to, even though maybe they are. Or falling into cultural traps where they fail to consider their own attractiveness and habits when they're trying to date. I'm sort of hitting a lot of the big stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, and a lot of those things sound like issues with dating in general and are not necessary. Some of them are specific to poly, like the community aspect and how to act within the poly community. But some of them sound like they're just issues that they might have dating elsewhere. Is that the case?
Yeah,
is this good dating advice all around?
A lot of this is like good dating advice for men, whether or not they're non-monogamous. A lot of this is good dating advice, whether or not the person happens to be male or poly. But in some ways, like there's this set of things that I more consistently see with men who are attracted to women. And so I wanted to collect those all in one place and sort of offer it as a supplemental to, okay, you've read The Ethical Slut, you've read More Than Two. Let's talk about gender a bit.
What are some of the misconceptions that men have about gender that you think hinders their poly dating?
There's actually one that I took years to get over myself. And I think there's this thing where even if a man intellectually understands that there are women into polyamory or women into non-monogamy, on some deep level, he may not trust it. I did not trust it for years. I did not trust that the women I was dating really wanted this thing that I also wanted.
Ah.
Right. It was super hard. And that's because, I legitimately had the experience when I was younger of all these women saying to me, oh, sure, I'm fine with non-monogamy. They were lying. They were not fine with non-monogamy. And it's easy to take that plus the cultural piece that tells us women only want monogamy and kind of just fail to really believe that the women in front of you who are saying things like, I want to be poly, really actually want to be on this journey in the same way you do.
So how do you reconcile that? Because I do also know a lot of people that have found someone to date of whatever gender that said they were okay with poly, or at the very least thought it was a great idea, and then ended up running off with somebody who promised them monogamy. So how do you reconcile that? How do you trust people when they say that they're into poly?
That one just took me a really long time. Like, I don't have a great answer. Some of it is just like recognizing that, though. Saying, oh, I have this mistrust and it's probably wrong. And if I can then try to do my best to recognize the actual desires of the actual women in my life, that will help me sort of get past the sense of distrust. And that's the process I had to go through a number of years ago. Relatedly, I think I might have a section here on what I call non-monogamous trauma that is related to this, if you want reading.
All right, let's go. Fresh from the book. You heard it here on Poly Weekly.
This is this concept that I've been dealing with a lot, polytrauma, I think of it as. I wrote a section on it in the book here. Non-monogamous trauma and distrust. Beyond what we've discussed, there's often a background issue that I think of as non-monogamous trauma. People who come to non-monogamy have often wanted to live this way for a long time, but their culture keeps forcing them back into monogamy. The fact is, most uninformed forays into non-monogamy go horribly wrong. So people often experience a long period of being lost in the wilderness, sort of in a place of stigma and being blocked from their goals. This trauma shows up later in subtle and not so subtle ways. So basically, we get wounded in our search for non-monogamy, and then it takes us a long time to let that wounding go. Most obviously, We often have trouble trusting that our partners are actually really interested in non-monogamy and are enthusiastically willing to support us in non-monogamy. Monogamous people are often willing to be non-exclusive at the beginning of a relationship, but later demand exclusivity, regardless of what you told them and what they agreed to at the outset. Because monogamous people always just assume that they can sort of have monogamy, no matter what they've said. A couple of bad experiences like this can make a person really distrust others' supposed interest in non-monogamy. In addition, as I was saying, we are conditioned to believe that women are never interested in non-monogamy. So many non-monogamous men who have been burned get that idea solidly stuck in their heads. This basic lack of trust leads to other problematic behaviors. Men will refuse to negotiate around their non-monogamy at all. They will disappear or stay out of contact in order to exert a kind of like control over the commitment level. Or they will try to keep everything highly compartmentalized and make sure lovers are not aware of each other, possibly lying to do so. People may turn to manipulation and control, also known as abuse. All of this leads to problems in connections because basic distrust will scuttle any connection.
You had a lot of heavy stuff, but a lot of that does sound familiar, not happily, not in too many of my relationships, but definitely in the relationships of people that are writing into the podcast. That is not an unfamiliar path.
Yeah, and it's very easy to fall down. And I think this is a good example. Like in the book, I get into a lot of the like, oh, so here's a habit. And the habit might be like sort of like just not calling people back or being really flaky. And it's like, oh, where does this habit come from? And then I get into the psychology of it. Maybe you don't trust that this person is actually okay with your non-monogamy. And you think that, like according to cultural scripts, this woman wants to tie you down into some kind of monogamous thing. So you're like, oh, I'll call you on Saturday maybe, in order to like try to make it clear that it's a non-monogamous situation.
Now, I do want to point out that we may have some background noise, and we are not torturing a child. That is just a very vociferous cat who believes it has not been fed when in fact it has.
And the cat might have some trouble.
So I think this is interesting. I like the idea that one of the things you're doing is not giving general advice, but actually taking the time to question some of the cultural norms and drill down and see how those cultural norms are driving behavior, which we talk about often at a high level, but I'm not sure that we have a lot of other books that really drill down into that and sort of help walk people through the process of, hey, if you're acting this way, this might be why. Let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I feel like we need the whole piece. Because I think often there will be some kind of like insecurity that is in many ways gendered or from a gendered experience. And which is not to say like only men have that, right? It's like not only men have non-monogamous trauma for sure. But, I think if we can get into some of the common gendered experiences, then it helps diffuse a lot of this stuff.
Where did you get your source material? Clearly you've had your own experiences. Did you do interviews? How did you figure out which sort of key aspects you wanted to drill down on?
I've done a lot of coaching of poly people. So I've sort of seen these, or non-monogamous people. So I've seen a lot of these cases sort of in things people have brought to me. And some of that's been like more official coaching. And a lot of it has just been people talking to me. Like I literally got a message yesterday from someone like, hey, I'm sorry to bother you. I don't know if you're a person for this, but like help. So there's a lot of that. And a lot of it is just, having been around a while and, holding workshops and sort of thinking about the stuff, but like seeing the patterns in what goes wrong. So yes, there's a lot of me in this book. You can kind of read the book as like, Pepper has succeeded at polyamory. Here's how you could succeed the way Pepper has succeeded. But, I tried to be more general than that as well.
Yeah, I think your current title actually is probably better for sales and marketing.
Right.
Pepper has succeeded. You can too. So what are the other sections of your book? I kind of want to ask you to read another section for us.
I could, but actually let me just sort of hit the table of contents and talk about some of the stuff we get into. Mm-hmm. There's a section on like authenticity and integrity, which I find, in all fairness, everyone has a lot of trouble with in non-monogamy, but I talk about it
indeed
in a gender-specific way. There's a big section on attraction. There's portions on community, socializing, flirting, navigating play parties, conversations in relationship and STI conversations. Mm-hmm. And also like a very large section on sexual entitlement, sexual consent, and abuse in community. So that sort of like gives you the overview.
I kind of want to make a snarky comment about perhaps we should give this book to a few congressmen, but probably a little too late for that.
If we could get them in the door of like a real sex positive non-monogamous community in the first place, that would be...
If we could explain the very concept of sex positivity at all. But I digress.
Right. I think there's a thing there outside of this book that is a lot of the work we are doing in these communities to create like healthy non-monogamous situations or healthy consent situations are actually anti-abuse, anti-rape kind of goals. Mm-hmm. Because there's so much unhealthy non-monogamy, say, out there, as evidenced by your congresspeople.
Well, and so much unhealthy monogamy, to be honest, as well. I mean, it's
absolutely.
We've done a lot of harm by being sex negative in this culture. But I digress. So what section would you like to read to us from next?
I have a huge thing about community and about how important community is to non-monogamy. And this is a place I see guys in particular. I mean, I see everyone fall down on this. Couples will like open their relationship and then not actually go find community for 10 years, and they will fail for 10 years straight in this really hard way. But men in particular tend to think they can sort of do it on their own and will have trouble finding community. So let me read a little section on community. This is, again, the beginning of a chapter. The single biggest contributor to successful non-monogamy is finding a non-monogamous community and integrating into it. People who join a community of experienced, supportive fellow explorers usually succeed in their non-monogamous journey. People who do not tend to fail. This all makes sense when we think about non-monogamy as a set of skills. Mainstream culture expends a lot of effort training people on how to do monogamy. And I put well in the book, but actually mainstream culture sort of trains people how to do monogamy poorly,
it's true.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Non-monogamy has its own set of skills, rituals, and learned lessons that are necessary for success, and these are different from what culture gives you. Most of us come to non-monogamy not having learned any of these skills. You can learn a certain amount from books. However, people acquire knowledge better and understand it more deeply when learned from other people, from role models, conversations, observation. So, meaningful learning about non-monogamy requires having community with experienced people who are successful at it. And then I get into like communities in support, communities in dating, and basically I'm trying to sell community here.
Yeah, I think it's really true. It's one of the things I tell poly newbies is that one of the first things you need to do is go out and find a community. Even if you have and can afford a poly-friendly therapist, you really need to have people that you can just talk to about what's going on, even if you're not having any problems. I mean, when you think about it, how many people and media and videos and movies influenced the way that you think about monogamous dating? And now you're kind of starting over from scratch, and you think you can all just you can read a few books and then do it on your own, which, you can, but wouldn't it be nicer just to not stumble quite so many times along the way and talk to other people and just have them not, even if it's just to have them nod along and say, yes, oh, we went through that. So you're like, okay, all right, it's not just me.
Well, and that's the thing, I would say one of the things the polyamorous community has been most successful at is building a base of knowledge. Like really over the last 30 years, there have been a lot of books written, a lot of internet forum posts, a lot of people talking, and sort of lessons learned, right? Like if you look at the history of the books even, it's like the things people are saying now as best practices were things people were not talking about even 15 years ago. And so there's sort of this developing set of knowledge to make the stuff easier, which is good. Because when I started, there was not such a thing, and I did not find it, and there was not community. And I messed up for 13, 14 years straight before I had any kind of healthy situation at all. And I don't want other people to go through that. I'm always looking at what is the shortest amount of time people can have before they're in a healthy non-monogamous situation. And I would hope at this point that's less than 2 years.
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of sounds like the same reason I wrote my book, which was, my first poly relationship was wonderful, but also just chock full of so much drama that took so much time and energy. And that was, 5-6 years. And I thought, wow, if I can save people this type of drama over 5 years and cut that down to maybe like 6 months or a year, let me jump on that landmine for you.
Yeah, all of us, I say old timers. All of us old timers, right? Like, we messed it up. Don't mess it up like us. Do better. It's not hard. We have books. Read them.
Yeah. I mean, we stepped on those grenades and we stepped in it and we messed up our lives. Please listen to us so you don't do this. And make new mistakes. Right. Make fresh, brand new mistakes.
Mistakes at a whole new level.
Exactly.
Sure.
And then in 10 years, you'll write a book and you'll inform the next generation. It'll be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are actually, I can't believe we are almost out of time, but I think you might have had one more section of the book you could read to us from. I think you mentioned you had 3.
Yeah, we sort of covered the other one, but I've got this thing on attraction I want to read.
Let's do that then.
Just because, that's a really special section of the book. The other element of attraction to consider is women being attracted to us. As men, we have been well indoctrinated into the idea that our feelings of attraction are the ones that matter. The culture teaches men that any women will fall for us if we do or say the right things. Like just 80s rom-coms, right? Or that women want alpha men, pickup artists, or whatever the latest scam is trying to sell. This is wrong. Women are people with their own desires and agency, and so women will be attracted to you based on the particular traits that they happen to like. And that's going to be different as you deal with a lot of different women. Except that most women are simply not going to be attracted to you. People are just too varied for that. The myth that any man can get any woman if he just works at it hard enough is a key piece of male entitlement. It harms everyone, but especially women who are harassed and pursued when they are not interested. You need to separate this fantasy from the reality that only a fraction of women, probably a small fraction, will be attracted to you specifically and therefore available. And this is, again, the beginning of a chapter, and I get into how do we think about attraction instead of as matching, as how do we match well with people or find the people we match with rather than convincing.
Can I just say
right?
You really hit some hard truths in that one paragraph. Huzzah for saying that. And can I just thank you on behalf of women and female identified for actually saying that and putting that in your book. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a gentle book.
Yeah.
It's a book for, solving your problems, right?
Wow. And the book again is Playing Fair, a guide to non-monogamy for men into women. And where is the best place for people to buy that?
There's probably a better place. I think you can buy directly from Thorntree, though I don't have the website right now, but you can certainly find it on Amazon and purchase it there.
I will provide a link to Thorntree. And if people want to find out more about you, where can they find you?
I have a website with my writings, which are getting kind of old at this point, but they're still remarkably relevant. freaksexual.com. And I have a website with more writings and presentations and stuff, pepperminty.com. And
I'll provide links to those in the show notes at polyweekly.com, or if you are listening through an app, it will be directly in your app's show notes. Pepper, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, it's been a delight to chat with you. I'm so excited about your new book. It sounds like it's much needed. I might need to buy a couple copies for some people. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All my poly friends are totally awesome. But
buy a couple copies.
But if you have somebody new that you're dating, or maybe your partner has somebody new, just leave it in the bathroom reading, bedside reading, just throw it out on the coffee table. Mm-hmm. I think it'll be great.
Just put it in their hands and say, you have to read this.
You're reading this before we have sex again. I like it.
Nice.
Pepper, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks again to Pepper for taking the time to meet with us. I should tell you, for those who aren't aware of all the vagaries of podcasting, we actually spent an entire hour trying to deal with audio issues in order to record the conversation. We failed and we had to reschedule the conversation for 2 weeks later. So you were supposed to hear from Pepper a lot earlier, but things happen, and I'm just happy that we got a fantastic interview and that we got to find out about his book, which I think is going to be so helpful for those, your basic straight guy that's looking to do poly and do it right. Our feedback this week is from Nick about the show we did on asexuality, who said, "Don't want to spam your inbox, but wanted to update you on our story. I've always felt as a bisexual man that it was important to be out and open and visible. I've known since I was in my early 20s I was bi, and though I kept it very quiet for a long time, I've been actively vocal about it for about the last decade. That said, I never felt truly comfortable embracing what that means. I've spent the last 20 years with a wife who is asexual, and what sex life we've had has always been somewhat awkward, and we've never really talked properly or discussed out issues. I think, as a result, I've avoided dealing with my own issues around my own sexualities. I'm proud to be bi, I love being bi, but I still retain that part of my male brain that's also ashamed of it on some level. I've always had an interest in the idea of polyamory, but it never occurred to me that I might actually be poly. And I was also, I think, obsessed with not being one of those bisexuals that can't be monogamous. As superficial an article as that New York Times piece was, it did make me recognize elements of my own identity. And that self-liberation and Google led me to polyweekly. For Google. And can I just do a little side note here? So polyweekly, we have never paid for any promotion or ads or anything. So I'm a content marketer by trade. And this is living proof that if you put out good quality content and if you use it to have a conversation with your audience and if you listen to them and engage in creating content together with your audience, then you too can be on the first page of Google. No SEO required. Oh, all right. Actually, that's not true. I mean, I do optimize my posts with SEO, but still, you don't have to pay anyone. You just have to produce fantastic content. Anyway, but I digress. Nick continues, sex has always been a slightly awkward thing between us, and to be honest, not a frequent thing, and certainly not spontaneous. But yesterday, we had the most wonderful, intimate, and fun experience I think we've ever had. We both laughed, and we both felt that moment of closeness. There was no awkwardness, and it felt like we both understood what we both needed in that moment in a way we never had. I have no idea how this will play out, but for now we both feel very optimistic, and I no longer feel as if I have to repress an important part of myself out of guilt. So thank you for everything you do. You've certainly made a difference to this poly-bi guy's life. Oh, that's awesome. But I do want to give you the credit. I mean, thank you. But really, you're the one that read the New York Times article. You're the one that Googled it. You're the one that looked up and found resources and took that courageous step of confronting your guilt and shame and the other emotions you had about your own identity, and of doing the difficult work of actually communicating with yourself and with your partner about it. That takes courage. A lot of people never get there, so kudos to you. It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by Fubbly polyamorists everywhere. And our Happy Poly Moment of the Week is from Catharina, who says, I'm so psyched for this weekend and I have to share. Tomorrow evening, my husband is cooking dinner for our kids, me, my dom/boyfriend, and his own, my husband's, play partner/girlfriend. Now, my husband has been playing with this woman for the better part of 2 months now, and I have not met her. She and my husband see each other once a week at least, and do a lot of bondage together, and they also switch. So for the first time, we will all be together. She is getting the keys to her first rental on Saturday, and that's a big deal, right? Going to live in your own place after being with parents or roommates your entire life. Oh, she must be young. So with all of your advice on how to treat metamours in mind, I'm putting together a welcome home package with a bottle of wine, candles, some flowers, and a vase to give her tomorrow night as she leaves with my husband to spend the first night in her new place with him. The kids are staying home with me, and my dom is sleeping in our place too, so we're pairing off as if for a dance. Technically, it's not a happy poly moment yet, but it feels like it will be, and the joy is in the anticipation. Thanks for making me a better spouse, and metamour, lots of love from the Netherlands, Catharina. Catharina, that sounds so sweet. I love it. I absolutely love it. And, you know, there are always going to be bumps along the way, but anytime we can do these human gestures, you know, Lusty Guy's really great about bringing flowers to Elle or to me when we've had a bad day, not just to apologize, just to say, I'm sorry you had a bad week, or I'm sorry things are tough, or thank you for taking on extra work this week, or a gift certificate for a massage. You know, sometimes it's just getting out of the house so that Elle can have time to herself. Whatever it is that would be special for your metamour, that would be a true treat for them. It's so nice to be able to do that. And that's just kind of true for anybody, for any relative, friend, even for a colleague or a child. You should know what it is that is special for your close circle of friends and family, and sort of, you know, have those things in your pocket that you can do to provide a little extra joy for them. Catharina, I'm so excited. I bet it was a happy poly moment, and I hope it was a lot of fun. Well, that about wraps it up for today's show. We are a free resource. We've helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction into polyamory. If you have extra money, please donate, polyweekly.com. You have to scroll down to the bottom because we give you all the free content before we ask for your money. And you can always give us feedback by emailing polyweekly@gmail.com. Call 802-505-POLY if you'd like to book us to speak at your event. Yes, we do remote sessions through Skype. That would be lustyguy@polyweekly.com. And I think that wraps it up for today's show. So I will leave you saying, remember, it's not all about the sex.